the Torah time.
Let's see if you can top this assignment.
Oh really? Did she give a good Torah?
She did.
Okay, I'll try. So this week's Parsha includes the phrase, an eye for an eye, one of the most frequently quoted and misunderstood lines in the Torah. And for centuries, it has been used as evidence of Jewish harshness and even to justify anti-Semitic caricatures. But Jewish tradition has never read this line that way. Our sages understood it as a framework for justice, for restitution, and certainly not for revenge. It is about accountability, proportionality, and responsibility, not vengeance and not violence. And this gap between surface reading and lived interpretation feels especially relevant right now. Words, ideas, and identities can be flattened into slogans, can be stripped of nuance, and turned into accusations. And when that happens, misunderstanding hardens into harm. I'm going to step into something that feels particularly vulnerable to say out loud, but I invite you to open your hearts and listen, and I hope that we can hold this space together as a community. This week, with the Rodin and King David incident flaring up so publicly, I've thought about this idea of misunderstanding hardening into harm very sharply. And it made me realize that I've been living with the question of anti-Semitism versus anti-Zionism for a very long time. Since the 7th of October and the subsequent attacks on Jews around the world simply for being Jewish, I've been trying to make sense of all of this and to locate myself within it thoughtfully. And I'm hoping with this Devar Torah to open up ideas and questions inside of you, and my wish is that we can talk about it further when we have our brocha a bit later. So here are my thoughts as it stands right now. Many might argue that there's a clear and very wide divide between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And a few years ago, I might have agreed with this because after going to King David Linksfield and while studying humanities at Wits, I encountered perspectives that I'd never been exposed to before. Sitting with voices that expressed real pain forced me to ask difficult questions about suffering, about identity, and what gets done in my name as a Jew. And the experience didn't give me answers, but it deepened my questions further. And then in 2021, I attended a community building conference in Israel, where an incredible man, Avraham Infeld, a leader in our Jewish world, spoke about Zionism. And he argued that in a world organized around modern nation states, the Jewish people also need one. Jews are a people, he said, not only a religion. We have a shared history, culture, and identity. And when I returned, I shared his thoughts with my family at our regular Monday morning coffee with my gran, who is here today. And my gran told me a story. When Israel was declared a state, her father, my great-grandfather, was listening to the broadcast. And afterwards he turned off the radio and said, "We can now hold our heads up with pride." That moment symbolized a shift in Jewish self-understanding. Jews have survived centuries of displacement, and they'd even just survived the Holocaust. But a homeland reshaped our collective narrative. Israel, as a Jewish state, provided Jews all over the world at that time an anchor with dignity and belonging, and with a power we had not experienced for thousands of years. At the same time, what has been done with that homeland and that power has not been without moral cost. The suffering of others cannot be ignored, and that reality is so deeply painful and shameful. Zionism remains a charged word in many spaces, even in this room, and I too continue to wrestle with it. But it seems that having a homeland does offer Jews a sense of belonging, continuity, and collective strength, And even with all its complexity and contradictions, for the vast majority of Jews all over the world, Israel is a part of our identity as a people. The King David Linksfield and Rodin debacle has been so disturbing to me because it was a moment where anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism became dangerously entangled. When anti-Semitism occurs, it must be called out clearly. And in this instance, the harm was directed at Jews. The objection, reflected in the leaked voice notes, was to King David being a Jewish day school. And the volume of anti-Jewish vitriol that surfaced online around this showed how quickly the mask can slip. And here I come back to our saying from the Parsha, eye for an eye. That verse is not just about justice. It is also a cautionary tale about interpretation. When people read the phrase as a license for violence, they miss the entire moral project of our tradition. A distorted reading can become a weapon against Jews, in the same way anti-Zionism can quickly become a cover for hatred of Jews. Rhetoric is very powerful and can be used to legitimize harm. So at the same time, we as Jews must use language very carefully. We need to think very carefully about the connection between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and we should have a thoughtful response when others conflate them in ways that become hateful and dangerous. It is such a difficult balance, and I really feel the tension. And perhaps this is where Tu B'shvat, this festival that we're still celebrating, might offer us a helpful image. We celebrate trees for their visible fruit and beauty, but what sustains them are the roots that we do not see. Roots grow quietly, they grow underground, they hold tension, they seek nourishment, and they anchor the entire organism. The wrestling that we do with language, with identity and interpretation is a lot of root work. It is slow, it can be uncomfortable, it is rarely visible, but it shapes what eventually grows above the surface. If we rush to easy answers, we weaken these roots. But if we sit with the harder questions, we sit in the discomfort, we find the nuance, we might cultivate something far more resilient for us as a people. And my final story is this. Benjamin does private swimming lessons at Rodin Primary School. And this week he and Ella were very nervous to walk onto the campus, especially Ella, still in her King David uniform. And I told them it would be fine, even though I myself felt a little bit apprehensive. We walked to the pool, and the swimming teacher came straight over to us and gave us a huge hug and said how glad she was to see us. A Muslim family sat nearby on the bleachers, smiling in quiet solidarity. And in that moment, our shared humanity and our common hopes as parents and as children felt undeniable. And perhaps this is where the real root work begins, in small, ordinary acts of recognition and care. Jewish tradition teaches us that interpretation of language is not optional. It is an ethical act. We are responsible for how we read, not only sacred text, but each other, our histories, and our present realities. An eye for an eye asks us not to grab the most literal or inflammatory reading, but to pause, interpret deeply, and tether justice to humanity. In a moment when so much discourse collapses into accusation and division, our inheritance is a culture that insists on nuance, contexts, and responsibility. We have to live inside that tension. We have to refuse easy readings and acknowledge that language has profound power. This act may itself be a sacred practice. Shabbat Shalom.
Wow.